Welcome to the Building BN podcast, where we take an inside look at Bloomington-Normal economic development with industry pros, local businesses, and community partners. Hosted by your BNEDC. All right, so this is a special edition podcast of Building BN, and this is usually we'd like to celebrate stories. And in a way, it is a celebration because you are moving on to bigger and better things, but we wanted to give a special farewell podcast to Casey Peterson, who is our Director of Business Attraction. But to jump in, do you want to just talk about, I guess, how you ended up here at the EDC?
Sure, yeah. I moved to Bloomington-Normal in 2018 for grad school after I had finished my service in the Peace Corps in Ukraine. And for those that don't know, ISU has one of the very few community and economic development master's degree programs in the country. And so I got into a couple different schools, and I said, my dad's from the Midwest. So I was like, oh, I think I got to go back to my roots in the Midwest. Chose Illinois State. And from there, did an internship my second year of grad school at Regional Planning Commission in McLean County. And during one of those, ran into you at a BN by the Numbers event. And came up to you afterward, and I said, planning's not really for me, but economic development seems like something I'd be really interested. How do I do what you do, right? Because I didn't really have a roadmap at that point. And you said, well, when you graduate, let me know, and we'll see if I have a job available. And you didn't, much to my dismay. Graduating in mid 2020, I don't recommend, but luckily you did have a recommendation, which was that you knew of an opening at the Peoria EDC. And probably on the strength of your recommendation and my wonderful resume writing skills, I got an opportunity at the Peoria EDC to be their Director of Rural Development. And I did that for about a little over a year. And once you had an opening, you reached out, and I said, yes, I'm tired of driving 45 minutes each way every day, and ended up at the Bloomington-Normal EDC.
Yeah, so the role that you started in was actually business retention and expansion, which I think for a lot of people is a good gateway into economic development because it's a great way to learn about the businesses that are here, what their challenges are. I think that actually hopefully sets you up for the next position. But from that, like looking back over all this, I mean, because you've had two positions, so BRE and then transitioning into the Director of Attraction, like, is there a moment or a project that you're most proudest of?
I would say there's a lot of them that are still coming, right? Absolutely. And I hope that I've teed those up for success. I think I will be most proud of those if and when they go. But probably, in business retention and expansion, the hardest thing is getting the meetings, right? And people always ask, who are you? What's the Economic Development Council? Because we don't do a lot of public facing stuff. And then if you don't have a good reason to meet with them, right? Like there's a new grant opportunity, some sort of funding mechanism. They're like, I'm busy, and I totally get that. But probably the Room Ready project is the thing I'm most proud of because it was, an effort here to consolidate they had multiple buildings, and they expanded into a brand new building. And you don't get a lot of opportunities to work with businesses who are doing actual expansion, especially in the 2021 to 2022 timeframe that I was in that role. And to drive by, I literally drive by that building every day on the way to work. And I think that's what's really cool about economic development is, even though I'm moving on from the BNEDC, I'll be able to look at that and hopefully someday tell my kids I did that building, and hopefully some more that are coming.
Yeah, and for all the listeners that are out there, the Room Ready project is actually, I think, south of the Connect Transit.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a great project. It's especially whenever it is somebody local and it is an expansion / consolidation. Everybody loves the new, bright and shiny new company that comes to town. But if you can help somebody that's already local, that's been here, we always joke, dance with the person that brought you. So they're here, helping them grow and invest is always really nice.
And we don't. I wish the community knew of Room Ready better, right? Those are ISU graduates, entrepreneurs who built something from the ground up, and now they have 80 plus employees here in Bloomington-Normal, and they're working with companies across the country, big companies. They do audio video solutions. If for those that don't know, please look them up.
Yeah, we'll hopefully put a link in there in the show notes as well, so people can get some more information on Room Ready. Another fun one I'd say is like, what's the biggest lesson you've learned since you've been here?
Lesson I've learned, I would say that confidentiality is key, right? And it's like we are privy in economic development to a lot of information, and a lot of people want that information. One, because it's just fun to be on the inside and be in the rumor mill, and I'm not going to say I don't enjoy part of that. I do, but other people want to use it for their own gain, whether that's personal, kind of like horse trading, secret trading, or professional, meaning they want to get access to this information to front run projects for their firm. Which again, I understand their motivation. But my biggest takeaway has been the risk reward on telling people who are not in the loop is zero, right? Because I've seen, I don't think I've ever spilled the beans, but I've seen stuff come out that shouldn't come out, and it comes back to me in this telephone way of like, well, I heard this, this Frankenstein version of the story, and it's just like, well, that definitely got out, but that's not what's going on. So confidentiality is key, and just there's a million different ways to kill a project. And it seems to be, like, I kind of joke that economic development's like Doctor Strange, multiverse, where there's only one way out of 600 to make this project happen, and it's our job to thread that needle and anticipate all of those different ways that a deal can get killed before it ever happens. And that's what, having seasoned economic development professionals like yourself and theoretically me, bring to a community. And that's the stuff that nobody ever sees. But I think that's also what makes us valuable, but the job fun.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, I do love that analogy, Doctor Strange, because it's almost another whole podcast you could do or a blog on just called How to Kill a Deal. Because a lot of times you can see it whenever the RFI information gets leaked out. I've seen states that will say, hey, we're working with so-and-so. I'm like, are you crazy? And immediately they're dropped out of the running. I think that some of the HQ2 might have changed some of that, because that was one of the most public RFIs or RFPs, requests for information, requests for proposals, I've ever seen. But still, for the most part, there's a lot of times, I mean, we don't even know, let alone who the company is. We don't even know the names of the people that are looking. Like, they keep
Yeah.
everything because
Yep.
it's very competitive in a lot of different industries.
Yeah. And the first time I saw that in person, I was like, this is a little bit over the
Overboard.
top. But now that I've seen it, I totally get it. Right? Like, they won't even tell you their last name, and their first name is not even their first name.
Yeah.
Right? And
Just
like,
call me Bob.
what are some ways, like some ridiculous ways, like for the audience, that you've seen a deal get killed?
Oh God, I mean, well, one, I mean, just like literally the governor or a mayor coming out and saying, yeah, we're working with so-and-so. That's an easy one. Other ones, which is probably more hidden, is just change in legislation or a change in the culture of a community. If somebody passes something, you might think that's what your constituents want, but you don't realize that there is a company out there that completely believes something different, and they'll just call the site search off and eliminate you from something like that. Other ones, I've unfortunately been a part of having people in town doing familiarization tours, getting really close to the finish line, and then another company closes, or somebody goes on strike, or who knows, insert any type of disaster, and it'll kill it beyond reasons that are out of your control. So for us to stack up the environment to make it, build that confidence, eliminate risk, I think is what's key to getting something even close. And I don't know if it's because we have been successful. I think a lot of people around here in the community have been successful for a long time. So I think there's a mindset of it's just going to happen. It'll be all right. And they don't know the coordinated effort that takes place behind the scenes and how long some of these projects have gone on. I've told the story before in Tinley. I came in at the end of a project that had been going on for 12 years and we finally got it closed. And then after I left, they finally built it. And so it's not an overnight success. There are some of those, but it's like an overnight success that took 10 years to do. But there's some crazy ways that they die. Was there anything, speaking of dying, like, was there anything that surprised you about the job, good or bad?
What I'm surprised at is how much is going on behind the scenes, right? Whether that's the amount of projects that I'm working on at any given time that nobody knows about, and realistically, they're not all going to happen. So again, that's why nobody knows about them, right? And sometimes, I've had, projects that, so I've been here coming up on 4 years, projects I've been working on for 3+ years, and then they just die, and you never get an answer. Those are the most disheartening ones, because you can't get better, and most of the times it's out of our control, right? It's a state policy, or even some sort of federal, winds changing. But the amount of ways projects can die, and just watching that happen is disheartening. But you got to go on to the next, right? You got to realize that, if you're batting, you get 3% of your projects that you're doing
That's pretty
really
good.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and also how much momentum based economic development is. When you're winning, everyone wants to pile on, which is so surprising to me, because you would think, like, you know okay, that means they're probably out of resources, whatever that is, whether it's, labor or incentive funds or space or whatever else. But no, everyone wants to pile on. It's the communities that are on a downward spiral that nobody wants to invest in, which you would think, that means opportunity, but it's not that way at all.
No, it's like the model we use for Econ Dev. It's a flywheel for a reason. And I've been in communities that have gone both directions. And luckily for us, we're heading in the right direction. But you're right, that momentum, it means a lot, because when you win and people see the investment, they're like, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. And that's a lot of reason that, even in the retail and restaurant industry, you'll see the same type of restaurants popping up over and over and over because it's successful. So that happens with data centers. It happens with manufacturing. Um, yeah, let's try to. It is competition.
Yeah, and I think, like, one aspect that, like, the public or the listening audience might not understand quite how important is how we speak of ourselves in the
Oh
community,
yeah.
right? And we've had, I hear a lot of stories, and I've seen it personally with other jobs I've worked. When you have a site selector in town, or a higher up at a company, right? And they'll ask the cab driver, they'll ask the wait staff at the restaurant, what do you think about this community? And if they get negativity, they're not coming here, right? And so, like, I think on my introductory podcast, I said when I moved here, I'm from Northern California originally, and people are like, oh, you're from California, we're sorry you're here. And I would just be like, oh, well, first of all, I'm not. And second of all, we got to stop saying that. And I do think in the 6 years I've lived here, it's gotten better. I think people
Yeah.
do have a decent amount of pride. But I wasn't sure if that was a Midwest thing, an Illinois thing, or a Bloomington-Normal thing. But I don't hear that as much anymore, and I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, I think it could be because of all the wins that are, have been happening recently. Because I know there was a little bit of a stall, especially, '08, there was definitely a stall. And then for a while, pandemic was its own thing, but I think we rebounded really well. We got that one ranking where we were like the top place to, relocate to or live in the US post pandemic, because we didn't really
Yep.
get hit like everybody else did.
Yep.
So yeah, that's momentum's definitely a thing. And I don't know if you appreciate it while you're in it, or I would say everything's relative. You can go to another community, you can almost feel it. And so it's as part of the story I know of Rivian and some other ones. And I thought of this, after the fact, one of the craziest stories, and it wasn't mine, on how somebody lost a deal, but they had the prospects in town. They went out, and the guy's like, hey, I'd like to get a martini. And they looked at the bartender, and I was like, can you make me a martini? And they're like, yeah. And I gave it to him in a rocks glass. And I was like, well, don't you have a martini glass? And they're like, no, we don't have martini glasses because, the customers steal the glasses, the martini glasses. And he's like, really? And he goes, hold on. So then they went to the next bar, same thing. Can I have a martini and a martini glass? And they're like, oh, no, everybody steals our martini glasses. And he's like, we're not coming here if you guys can't even keep your martini glasses. That's probably the wildest one, but that was a legit story from a site selector who killed the deal because the locals were stealing martini glasses.
Yeah, and I think it's our job to think about, not compare ourselves to our neighbors, right? Not with Decatur, Springfield, Peoria, but with, who we're actually competing for projects with. So if you're a C-suite executive and you've tasked a firm, or you're doing it yourself, to find out the best location for your company, right? Like, we might know all the best things about Bloomington-Normal, right? We know the neighborhood, haunts to hang out at and the best restaurants. But if that doesn't smack you in the face, right, and it goes somewhere else that does, in Arizona or Texas or somewhere that has, a brand new downtown, they don't have any history, but they have a brand new downtown because, everything was built 10 years ago. That's what we're competing with, right? And I think we have to understand that, we're competing beyond Central Illinois, and we need to have those things that smack people in the face and say this community is invested in itself, and people have pride in it too. And we have a lot of those. But and I'll say this as somebody who moved here, 6 years ago. Um, I wasn't sure if I was going to stay, but really, when I finished grad school, but when I started interacting with people in the community, and joining various, like a Rotary, or even just doing trivia nights and interacting and going different places in town, getting out of the ISU bubble. That only then is when I realized like there's actually a lot going on here,
Hmm.
but it's not apparent immediately.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know?
no, it's kind of the whole point of the Life Multiplied campaign that we're trying to promote the quality of life and quality of place, because we do have our bubbles. And from the outside, I mean, we're in central Illinois, so people don't think there's much south of I-80, but as a region, we do have a lot going on. So it's, again, everything's relative. We're not, Lincoln Park, Chicago when it comes to restaurants, but we've got some really good restaurants. And so we do like to bring in site selectors and everybody else just to show off the area with our familiarization tours. And then also, you've been a part of the familiarization packages or the fam packs that we send out so they can get a taste of what's going on here and just almost bombard people, with lumpy mail and let them know like, hey, we're winning again. I'd love to have you in town, and show it off. And that was, I know you've done that multiple times with different types of prospects, whether it's housing or, some of the manufacturing ones that come in. The foreign direct investments are always interesting too, because that says you're not just explaining Bloomington-Normal, you're explaining the United States of America and how things work here.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some good advice in there. Is there any other advice that you would offer somebody to take on, I'd say the BRE role first, and then what advice would you give somebody in the attraction side?
I would say, how I did it is I play, playing to my strengths, and my strengths are picking up the phone, which sounds, archaic
Basic,
at this
yeah.
point, right? But like pick up the phone, both answer it, but also call people and be persistent, right? Because if they don't know you, I remember when, post COVID, the state had these grants called Community Navigator grants. And so for businesses, they would pay us, a fee to go and work with businesses to help them fill out grants, right? And so I would walk uptown or downtown or even in Lexington and in some rural communities, and I would stop by and say, hey, do you know about this grant? And they would say, no. Who are you? And I go, I'm Casey. I'm from the Economic Development Council. And they go, never heard of it,
Yeah.
right? And so like it takes a little bit of tenacity to convince them that an hour worth of their time, right? I'm getting paid for it, but an hour worth of their time, they can get a $30,000 grant. If somebody walked into my business and told me the same thing, I would also think it's a scam,
Yes.
right? But it's like, then you have to figure out, okay, who do they know, who do they trust, and how do I reach that person? And then, a couple weeks or months of that, and then the community gets back, $3 million in grants that they
Mm-hmm.
otherwise would never have heard of, right? And so it's like the easy thing would to be like, well, they don't want my help, too bad. But it's like when you understand how transformative that money could be for that business, especially post COVID, you're like, they don't know what they don't know, but I can't. Doesn't mean I can give up, right? That's what we're paid to do. So in BRE, that's the biggest thing is using your connections to make sure that you can get in the door. And then they have that contact. So if they are going to expand, hopefully in the future, they give you a call. If they're having issues with labor force, they'll give you a call, right? You're almost like business therapists at that point. And, they can never say, I didn't feel connected to the community, because we can make any connection that they need.
Yes.
You know.
Then what about on the attraction side? Because that's another whole, like it's a different animal, almost a different personality type.
It is. You got to be a bit of a chameleon with attraction, right? Understanding what the client is and what their constraint is, like what problem are they trying to solve, right? And so you'll have a different pitch to a foreign company through foreign direct investment than you will an Illinois company who's maybe looking to open a second location. Explaining Illinois to the foreign direct investment client is a lot different than somebody up in Chicagoland. But at the end of the day, like, they got to like you,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And it's like, every community is going to hand them this one page that says, here's our demographics. We think you should move here, right? But like, if they believe either they like you or they believe that you're good at your job and that you're the person who's going to get this across the line for them, because at the end of the day, that's what site selectors get paid to do, is find the best site, but also the best site that can actually make it happen. And so it's our job to convince them that if you come to Bloomington-Normal, you work with us, we will do everything in our power to make it happen. And we've done it in the past, right? And show them our track record. And that's where that momentum comes into play. If you have that track record, you can easily tell them, we've done this before, look, and we'll do it again for you. And you can go back to your clients and say, this was the right decision.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's also like that brand. So it's not just a brand for the community, but also a brand for you personally. And we literally just heard it this morning. in one of our earlier meetings that, if you have somebody and you can call them on the cell phone and they're going to say it's taken care of, that goes a long way in this industry.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's something I think that you definitely excelled at. So with that though, I mean, what is like one thing you're going to miss about working for our organization?
There's a lot of it, I'll miss. Like, that was the hardest point, deciding to leave. Is like, I love this job. I love this office. I love my colleagues. And I love the community, and I'm going to stay in the community, luckily. And there's a certain ego there where you're like, I should stay here because I'm going to get these projects across the line. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I've had that.
I think what I will probably miss the most, and what I'll say that this organization has done really well, is allowing me or all of us as staff the flexibility to do what they need to do to get their work done without a lot of uh, you know uh, looking over your shoulder and micromanaging, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I trust you, I empower you, I train you to do what you need to do. And I think the results speak for themselves, but I've never had an organization who said that and actually believed it, or actually followed up on it.
Yep.
That will be the thing I miss the most. If I need to go have a lunch meeting to try to get this project nudged in the right direction, I don't have to get approval for it. We just have the meeting, and I can do that in an hour's notice. And I think that's, you trust us to do that, and I'm hoping my next opportunity is similar, but
Yeah.
you never know.
Never know. Well, that is
Yep.
something that, I mean, we are smaller, so we can be nimble. And just over my time of the 18 years doing this, I've worked in different structures and I've found out what I liked and what I didn't like. And even just the degree in organizational leadership, you play to everybody's strengths. And if you try to complement your own weaknesses, so you hire accordingly. But yeah, I really believe in that. It's like giving people the tools they need. It's more of like the servant leadership or coaching mindset and not the micromanaging, because, none of us know everything. But I think that's what's so cool about our team is like just the diversity that's here and thought and coming at from different angles is why we can hopefully listen and adapt quicker than most.
Yeah, I would agree. And all of us, especially in the office now, have different strengths, and the next person who takes over, my responsibilities will do it differently. And that's where, you know, I have a I don't want to tell somebody, here's how you do this. This is how I did it.
Yeah.
And either it worked for me or it didn't in this case, but you're going to do it completely differently based on your strengths. So
Yeah, and it's something that took me a while to realize too. And I probably took it for granted when I started, but that's how I was raised in the industry. Is that, yeah, like here's what I did, and you might listen to me and you might not. You're gonna have to learn for yourself. And so it's getting those aha moments, because I can tell you and I can tell the board, I can tell anybody else, like here's how to do it. But until you test it, you're not going to know. And that's something that actually happened at Notre Dame, where they made us struggle through everything. And I'm like, why? If you have the answer and if you know the code, why are you making us do this? It's because then it clicks. It's almost like you have to discover it yourself. Like you can't be persuaded, like, hey, come do this and try to be influenced to do it. You have to figure it out. And that is a balance, because I know you are one of the only ones that are actually certified here in Central Illinois as a certified economic developer. And you can do it by the book, but that book is nationwide average of best practices. It's not necessarily here. So everyone's gonna have their own spin. Um, yeah, so like the aha moments and that discovery is really important. And with that though, I do, because that's the way I've done it, and I'm not even see like in my role if that's the best way to do it, to let people kind of learn on their own with like, here's best practices, but here's how I would do it, and then you can figure it out. Is there, like, I don't know if that's the best way, but is there any advice that you give back to me or leadership on, I guess, training or just culture?
one of the biggest lessons I had to learn, and it was painful over the first like 2 years, is understanding the way things are versus the way things should be, right? And in every aspect, right? Whether
Yeah,
that's,
yeah,
politics or working with certain personalities, and not having the experience that you have, I think I kind of came in and I was like, well, they should just, they or we or this project, it should go like this. And you're like, just watch.
yeah,
And, and I would watch, exactly what you said unfold. And I probably had about 10 of those epiphanies where it's like, okay, right. Like, he was right. I didn't want him to be right.
oh yeah,
But,
because it's illogical.
mm-hmm. But as far as advice, you know, I really believe in the training for the staff. I went through it, and just being able to talk the talk and really zoom out and understand why economic development, what it is and why it's important. And I understand, like, economic development is one of those things that it's two big words together, and sometimes people's eyes glaze over, but other times people go, oh, I know what that is. And I kind of want to, I'm like, okay, tell me then, right? Because it's a lot of information about a lot of different things. And people think, their aspect, they might know an aspect of economic development, right? Whether it's real estate or finance or something else like that. And they might be an expert in that thing, but that's one of 10, 12 things that we have to know a lot about.
Yeah.
And be that person who, again, zooms out and says, how many different ways can this go wrong? And who needs to know in what order to make us have the best chance of getting this across the line, right? I think education to the community is incredibly hard, right? The people who are plugged in have been plugged in and will continue to be plugged in. The people who are not plugged in, who need to be, are incredibly hard to reach. So I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that's the art of economic development. And kind of rewinding back to just some of the beginning things that you said, it's like if people acted rational all the time, then this would be easy. It'd just be a math game at that point. It'd be Excel. Like, yeah, you put in what we have and you stack us up against somebody else, and then it just goes through because we're all in it for the right reasons. However, you're talking about state level, regional level, twin cities, multiple utility providers, like all these things that come together, and a lot of personalities and the confidentiality aspect. And I think I try to explain it by looking at it like, here's a data point. Yes, this makes sense. Here's the information from the data points. Here's the knowledge of knowing, what to actually do with it. But I think it's the wisdom of when and who that we struggle the most with, because that's that timing aspect. I wish in a perfect world we could just bring everybody to the table all at once and say, here's what we're doing. And everyone's going to be like, yes, go forward. That's not how it works. And that's, if there's influence, there's politics, and it's across the board. But yeah, I think that's the hardest part, I think, to explain, because everybody wants to know, but knowing can literally kill the deal.
Exactly, right. And we saw that, here at the EDC with our entrepreneurship grants, right, for the $10,000, where we have like all public funds, they have a but for clause, meaning but for this money, this project would not happen, right? This business would not open. But when somebody from the media, or somebody from this company, or talks to the media and says, hey, we're going to open this thing next month, and there goes the but for, right? And so I have to call them and say, I'm really happy that you're getting media attention. Unfortunately, you just lost $10,000. I've made that call multiple times, right? And I hate doing it, but people, again, that's where people are excited to talk about it, and I'm happy that they are. But it's the confidentiality that kills the most things.
Yeah. And I've unfortunately seen that, not just on that scale of the $10,000 for the mom and pop. I've seen it for the multi-billion-dollar manufacturing plants. Same thing, because everybody's just real excited and they want to get it out there. And as soon as it hits the media, the way the state of Illinois and even our local incentives, it's all but for. It's not you do this and you get a rebate. It is, without this, you wouldn't do it. So as soon as you commit and sign anything, it's off.
Yeah, and that's where, like, the balance of art and science comes in, right? And I have only been in this industry about 5 years now, but you've been in it much longer than that, and the more experience you have, the more who deserves to know when, and who's legally allowed to know when.
Yeah.
So.
And it's also, and this is going to sound kind of depressing for the industry as a whole, but setting your expectations, because I still remember you were in the same boat I was. Like, yeah, we're going to do all these, we're going to have all these jobs and all this stuff. You're fired up. And I'm just like, you're going to get your heart broken. And sure enough, it's like, I'd be curious, like, how many times did you strike out at bat before you're like, okay, this is not as easy as it looks?
Probably 10.
10,
right?
Yeah.
Like, and just realizing that for completely different reasons, and I would say 9 of those 10s were completely out of our control, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
like, you hope everything's going to go in the right direction. You nudge it, kind of to the next process, and then you just I kind of wince while, when I send that email and hope that, okay, we're still on board, let's on to the next. But I think having being able to get back up and like I took a day off one time after one project,
Yeah,
fell
it's so,
apart
so
because I was
big.
just like, you know what,
What are we doing here?
my attitude will not benefit the office today. I'm going to take a vacation day just to simmer off because it's 3 years of work, and
Yeah,
again,
gone.
it'll go down the drain in one email because one person in another country or another state um, decided so, or one company had a bad quarterly earnings report, right, and
Hmm.
that went down the drain after 3 years. And it's heartbreaking because the potential impact it has on the community, right, on the school districts. My wife's a teacher. I'm really interested, and that's what we do is create jobs and create investment. And some of these are just absolutely massive jobs and massive investment, and I want to see those get across the line because I know the community, it would benefit the community long term, and the people I know who own, retail and restaurants, and that trickle down effect that we have, or the multiplier effect we have from those jobs, and you feel a little bit personal responsibility if it goes down the drain, even though it's not your fault.
Yeah. No, I think it definitely tampering expectations is a big one that takes a while because, yeah, on paper, again, if everyone acted rationally, we would win so much more than we do, but there's so many outside factors. I think another one that I've always found interesting is when we win, we know way ahead of time. And so by the time the groundbreaking, everything comes out, that's usually 3 to 6 months later. And it's kind of like we're already on to the next one. So besides tampering expectations, what is some other advice you would give, your younger self, basically for anybody, because we do lead and teach everybody Bloomington-Normal's ways in economic development through basic econ dev. Like, what's some advice you'd give somebody who just started in this industry?
It's like almost like life advice, but it's like focus on what you can control because
Oh
there's
yeah,
so much
yeah.
of it that's out of your control, and those are the most frustrating parts. Um, I'm not good at it. I know that's something that I need to work on is to continue to focus on what I control. But when you see the same obstacle come up over and over, and there's nothing that you or I or anyone in our organization can really do about it, um, that can be disheartening. Um, but I don't want anyone to lose their enthusiasm either,
No, not at all.
because the work is super important, and I think, like, for me personally, I've turned it into a game a little bit in my head, right? Where it's like, I'm on a board here, and sometimes it's like chutes and ladders, right? Sometimes you climb the ladder and you're like, we're almost there, and then you fall back down the chute. And I'm like, okay, we fell back down, but we're gonna either move on to the next project and put this energy towards that, or we're gonna try to find a way we can fix this until we get an absolute no. Um, but um, yeah, overall, I would say that's got to be it's stuff that I'm still learning.
Yeah. Yeah, and to me it is trying to prioritize your time and your resources
Mm.
because you say economic development, depending on where you're at, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. That could be all the way down to doing a neighborhood grocery store or doing affordable housing, workforce programs. Yeah, that's why the strategic plan is so important. So you can prioritize, so you can come in and again control the controllables because there's a million ways to kill a deal, and you can see some of them coming. And is it worth your time to go out there and try to change all of that? Or is it something where you want to help the state create a new incentive program because you've heard enough from BRE visits? This is why these people aren't growing. And then that happens. It's almost an indirect way that impacts so many more people. So yeah, it
Yeah,
is like, what can
and
you control? What's going to give you the biggest return? And then just hyper focus on that.
you tell me, you've been around longer than I have, right? But since I started this career in 2020, it's just been absolute turmoil, right? Ever between COVID and, like, you had a crazy swing towards employees in the job market, and now we're kind of swinging back towards employers, and they didn't like the employees having all that power again, and just like the volatility is all over the place. But our strategic plan is annual, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's why we do it annually. Yeah.
trying to do it every year to meet the market demands. It's tough. It's a tough balancing act, and to just try to thread that needle every year. And sometimes it's trying to anticipate what's coming is really hard,
Yeah.
especially right now.
Especially right now. Yeah. It's like the change of administration, change like the tariffs, and everyone's like, what does this mean? But I think that's why it's important. You've got those like core things, those core six things, 6 to 8 that you're always going to do. But it is neat to go back and look at the very first plan that we did like 5 years ago compared to now, and what has Never thought I'd talk about housing. Never thought I'd talk about childcare. We have 2 childcare things on there, but all this impacts workforce, which impacts everything else. So I really believe in the process of getting back to the businesses and the investors and finding their needs and tweaking our priorities every year. I think that it's shown just in what we've accomplished that is the way to do it.
Yeah, we always joke, that nobody, this is not true at all, but like, if you do a project that's 100 jobs or something like that, and we know how much work that takes and how important and impactful it is for those people, the employees and their families. But we always joke around the office that if we could just bring a Trader Joe's here,
Oh yeah,
then
get a statue of
everybody,
us.
yeah, then we get a statue, and then everyone would know who we are. Like, oh, the Economic Development Council, how they got the Trader Joe's, right? So anytime, when you were saying earlier, people have different ideas of what economic development is, and I would say that's the number one question we get, right?
Yeah, it's like
Can you get us a Trader Joe's?
it's like yeah, we
No,
don't
but
do.
get you an automotive factory.
Yeah, yeah, you got $5 billion and about 10,000 jobs. How's that suit? But if you don't work there, it's not that big of a deal. Um, yeah, great. It's been great having you here. Are there any final thoughts that you've got for the organization or just the experience?
I mean, I would just tell anyone who's listening that what I've seen here over the last 3.5 years, the community is in really good hands, from an organization standpoint, and that um, we know what we're doing, and trust us that we need to exist as that um, impartial, you know, organization that's looking on behalf of the entire McLean County economy. We're as far as I am aware, the only people doing that and who can really zoom out and say, what is the best use case of these resources for this community and what it needs right now and hopefully in the future. But to anyone that's listening, I would say, trust this organization is working on your behalf, and 99% of the work you'll never see, um, because that's kind of our, how we have to operate with confidentiality. But there's, 4 or 5 good people here every day working their butts off to try to make jobs and create investment in this community.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's somebody told me early in my career, like, you're an economic developer? Are you one that talks about it or you're one that does it? And I've been trying to figure out that balance of, doing the work, but also telling the story. And that's something that we still struggle with today. Why we have our BN by the numbers to let them know, like, here's our initiatives, here's what we're working on, here's the investment, here's the return. You can see the results, like it's all around us. And even when I go out of town, everybody talks about how great things are in Bloomington-Normal and McLean County. I mean, the investments there, the jobs there, the ripple, you can literally feel it. And it's been great to have you here to be a part of it. From you coming up back whenever I had hair and you had a ponytail, I believe. And you're like, how do I do this? And I'm like, okay.
You just like, cut your hair, hippie.
No, yeah, my hair used to be not that long, but shoulder length. So no, it's been awesome to see you come in, see those aha moments, because I can see a lot of me early on in my career, in the staff as you guys are struggling through different things and getting your hopes up and then getting your dreams crushed and then getting a win. Because I mean, getting a win and having that in your portfolio, and you've had a lot, is something that we'll definitely hopefully list tomorrow as we announce everybody of your departure, and we'll attach this to it. For what you're going to do next. But yeah, I'm excited for you. You've done an amazing work here. You brought a work ethic that we had not seen before, especially when it comes to, I don't say bugging people, but pinging people, staying on top of where the projects are. And a lot of those, which are not out yet, like you brought back from the dead. There was a couple that were dead twice, and you literally leave the office, drive to them, and resuscitate it. And that's happened. So a lot of these that are coming would not exist without your work. And hopefully, as you stick around and as you succeed, you're going to drive by more and more of those projects. I mean, you're going to be at the ribbon cutting, you'll be at the groundbreaking, but it's literally knowing that you are a part of that. That's the big takeaway, because in my value for this is like, you leave it better than you found it. And I mean, there's even Neil Finland that said, we want to find a place that our kids want to come home to. And
Yeah.
you got yours, I got my daughters, and I'm just like, that's kind of the end goal. And I think we've been really good. And you've played a major role, and no one's really going to know that story, unfortunately, because that's the nature of the industry. But know that I know, and know that we know, and the board has appreciated everything you've done. And there's so many, there's multiple $1 billion waiting out there that you've been juggling that when that finally hits, game changer. And so, yeah, if I could, I'd build a statue of you. But looking forward, looking forward to your next adventure. And yeah, looking forward to working with you still in your new capacity, which we won't discuss now. We'll leave that as a cliffhanger. But when it comes out, it'll be amazing. And yeah, hopefully, get you back on in your new capacity. And after you've been settled in for a little bit, and talk about how we can keep moving Central Illinois and Illinois forward.
Awesome. No, I appreciate the kind words, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll be around.
Cool. So yeah, hopefully we'll do a follow-up interview after a while, and then talk about what's new. Other than that, is there anything else you wanted to cover?
I don't think so. You always ask people, what's your perfect day in Bloomington-Normal. So I'm going to ask you what it is. I haven't asked you in a while.
Oh yeah, my perfect day right now, man, that's a tough
And
one.
I know it's St. Patty's Day coming up, but
yeah, St. Patty Day is coming up.
Patrick thinks that he is the Patty and Patty's Day.
I love the fact that the town of Normal throws a parade for my birthday at St. Patrick's Day. So that's a good one. But no, I would say starting the day off probably round of golf, like bright and early. Like I love the golf courses around here. We've got so many golf courses. So taking somebody golfing would be awesome. Then probably hitting somewhere up for breakfast. Fort Jesse, I guess where I would take them. Fort Jesse or the original Pancake House for sure. Egg Republic's been pretty popular as well, though. From there, probably taking them over to one of the universities, maybe getting a lecture, hopefully on economics. Go by the Stevenson Center, have them hear besides from us, why economic development is so valuable. I think it'd be cool, but there's definitely a different vibe between uptown and downtown, and you have to experience that. And you can't do it without walking the campus. Ideally, you do it during the fall too, because that's just my favorite season. From there, probably grabbing lunch somewhere, probably a steak. Oh, actually, better yet, would go over to Blow No Pizza and do some duck pin bowling, because that's a fun new addition that we've got there. Then probably doing a loop, our regular fam tour. I love driving over the hill and watching people's reaction when they actually see Rivian. Because when I got here 5 years ago, there was 300 people in that plant, and they're like, what do I do with the other 2/3 of this one building? And now the work they've done has been phenomenal. But just doing a loop around town, doing the lap, letting them see where all the development is, go by Ferrero, because that does not look the way that it looked earlier when I got here either. So almost, I guess, showing off our work. Show off the work, show off the investment, hook them up with some of the elected officials as we move around town, and then probably hit some breweries because we've got so many of those. So yeah, the brewery side, getting some other good food, and I always have to throw a plug in for Epiphany Farms. So getting a steak either at Epiphany Farms or Bakery and Pickle, and then probably hitting a downtown scene. Ideally, there's a good band in town at the Castle because we've had some of those recently. But yeah, it's letting everybody know what you don't know, because I think a lot of things here are hidden. And when you walk inside, you're like, I had no idea this was here. And then hopefully there's a Bison game and they can go see our hockey team, which has been a lot of fun too, to see come back to life. And ideally by then, you're going to see some work in downtown Bloomington with the TIF district that they're redoing with the streetscapes. But I know I say this a lot coming from where I've come from, but I think a lot of our residents in this community take everything that we've got going on for granted. And you don't have to drive too far to realize over time what's happening here compared to a lot of other areas. Like nobody has this investment. And if Rivian announced today on top of Ferrero, on top of Room Ready, on top of Brant, all that, I think it's the fact that everybody grew in an expansion that it's kind of like, it's just happening. If you just said you're going to drop $5 billion and 10,000 people, we'd be the biggest thing in the nation. But it's been that slow growth.
I looked into that, and when I go to the conferences, not to beleaguer or discussion here, but when I go to site selection conferences and we talk about Rivian, and they're like, how many employees are they up to? 7,000-8,000, and they're like, okay, when are they going to fill those by? I'm like, no, they have them, right? Like, and people can't believe it, because like the big RFIs we go after, for big factories are $1,500, $2,000 jobs, right? That every state is competing for. Every governor is throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at these companies. I bet you, I looked into it, I found one other manufacturing project in America that was bigger in terms of jobs than Rivian is in the last decade.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so rare.
I don't think, like you said, I don't think the locals really understand like what an absolute albatross of employees and wages that company has been for us. And I don't think it's the stories being told around the country either. right? And I know the governor's doing a good job of doing it, but there are no 7,000, 8,000 job manufacturing plants. They're just not. They just don't happen anymore, and we're incredibly, fortunate and lucky. And it wasn't all, certainly wasn't all luck, but it played a certain part, played a part of it
Yeah.
to have them here.
No, I always joke that I'd rather be lucky than good. And it's funny with Rivian and chasing the whales. That's not how I approach, or we usually approach economic development. You don't chase that one big one. It's a accumulation of a lot of smaller ones, but that's a small one that turned into a massive one. And that's what you want. Like we talked about early on with the BRNE, it's like, are you growing? If not, what's in your way? How can we help you grow? And there's been enough work between us and the state and the town and the city and the county to make this an environment where people want to invest. And it's been happening. And yeah, I look forward to continue that. But yeah, for the perfect day, hit as many spots in town, play a little golf, have some good beer, eat some good food, see a concert. And yeah, me and my family, we love it here. And so it's been good. And I think that's why you stayed as well. I mean, there's really good people here, and that makes it easy to sell.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again for your time. Thanks again for the interview, and we'll catch up on the next one, and wish you the best of luck in your next endeavor. And you always have a home here.
Awesome. I appreciate everything you've done for me and the organization has done for me. So myself and my family appreciates it.